everyone, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Beautiful You. I'm your host Avantika. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Mental Health Awareness Month. In this month, we are putting out an episode every single week to celebrate mental health awareness, and we have very special guests with us to talk about their journey with mental health. In today's episode, we have Lauren with us. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Avantika. Thank you for having me again.
We thank you for being here. This is the second time we are having Lauren on our podcast in just the span of 2 months. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, do check it out. It's soul searching and solo travel with Lauren, and we talk about everything related to travel. She has been on the road for about 8 months, and she has done some crazy ass shit. So do check it out. It was a really good episode, and it's so good to have you back again.
I'm so excited to be back for part 2 and to dive into some different topics this time, looking at travel from kind of a different perspective, one with mental health, especially with May being Mental Health Awareness Month. So very happy to be back. Thank you for giving me the platform.
Of course, yeah. So for the ones who haven't listened to the previous episode, could you tell us a bit about your travel journey and what's going on with you currently?
Of course, yeah. So I've been traveling for coming up on 9 months now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But I'm originally from the United States, most recently lived in New York City, and last summer sold everything I owned and decided that I wanted to travel the world. I was planning on doing this a few years ago, right after I graduated university, but that's when COVID hit. So I had to go back home to the States after living in France. And I've kind of had the travel bug since I was young, and started traveling internationally when I was 20, and now a few years later I'm on my first really big trip. So I started in Lisbon, and I traveled with no winter clothes, so it was my kind of duty to follow the sun. So I stayed in the south of Europe, but then I ended up having to buy a bunch of winter clothes because I stayed in Europe until January. So after Europe I went to Turkey and then came to India. So I've been to India for around 3 months now.
So you have lived in New York, Minnesota, Lyon in France, and then in Mumbai, right? This is, I think, your 5th city or 4th city?
I think it's my 6th or 7th. So I was born in Minnesota, which is in the north of the United States, in the very middle, bordering Canada. Mm-hmm. After that, I moved to Seattle, Washington, on the upper West Coast, and I did university there. So I was there for 3 years. I did a exchange study abroad in Lyon, France, in the east of France, and that was only 6 months. After that, I moved back home to Minnesota because of COVID. Then I moved out to New York City for a job out there, and then after that, that's when I started my trip in Lisbon. I quote unquote lived on an island in Croatia called Hvar. Mm-hmm. I only lived there for around 2 months, but I kind of count it, a couple months is a good amount of time there, and I felt like I was fairly established, I guess. And then now Mumbai, I've been here for around 2 months as well. Not expectedly, none of my travels this time have had a plan, and we can kind of talk about how that's impacted my mental health and the lessons that I've learned, and how my mind has evolved and changed over time. So I don't know how many cities that was, 6, 7, quite a few.
Yo, that is crazy. That is genuinely so crazy. So you had mentioned that you were diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age. Could you tell us how did you get the diagnosis, and what was your initial reaction to it?
Sure, yeah. So when I was quite young, I was a very curious, kind of outgoing, funny child. Mm-hmm. I love to have fun. I was just really silly and playful and creative and fun. And so I think that naturally, being a kid that's in private school, where things are a little bit stricter, and I just not to share too much, but having parents with fairly high expectations on grading and sports and things like that, and being someone that's just naturally a creative person, it led to that kind of a diagnosis maybe when I was, I don't know, 7. And I always thrived academically. Like I got really good grades and stuff, but I did feel like I don't know. I would just joke around in class a lot and stuff like that. And my parents and stuff, I guess, thought that was a little bit out of the ordinary. So they would take me to, I don't know, different like psychiatrists and neurologists and stuff from a young age to figure out what was happening and why I was a little bit more on the hyperactive side.
7 is a fairly young age, to be honest.
Yeah, it was honestly like I lean more on like the spirituality kind of side of things, and the way I see it is like I think that kids are meant to be really curious when they're young, and so part of me kind of questions like I've gone and seen psychiatrists in adulthood and stuff, and like I still have the ADHD diagnosis, but part of me is like I got diagnosed when I was so young, and kids are just naturally a little bit more hyperactive, so sometimes I just question things a little bit, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Would you want to, like, I don't know, see a psychiatrist for ADHD again, just to make sure that's really the case? Because I agree with you, like kids are supposed to be curious and just hyperactive and stuff. It's just what it's like when someone is like 5 or 7 or 10, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And when you're young, you're just so like moldable and stuff. So I guess this is just kind of what I've been told since I was little. And so, yeah, I'm definitely in adulthood going and speaking to different psychiatrists and psychologists and figuring out how my mind works now that I have like the autonomy to do it myself, you know?
Fair enough. I'm actually kind of curious, because you got the diagnosis at such a young age, did you know what exactly like ADHD was and what did it entail and stuff?
I didn't know things like executive function, because I don't think that people know the words executive and function when they're like 7. But I knew, weirdly, that's actually a really fascinating question. I knew about so many like sort of things that you could be diagnosed with. I don't like the word like disease. I don't like the word, I don't know, a lot of words to describe like mental health conditions and things like that. There are many alternative words that I find a lot more like accurate, as well as less stigmatizing. So I don't really like to use those words, but like I knew what depression and anxiety and even like Tourette's and a lot of different things were from a really, really young age. So yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Do you think you might actually have ADHD now, because now that you're like grown up and you know you have had so many experiences? Or do you, I mean, I don't know, like, would you agree with the diagnosis that you got at that young age?
I think like in a way I do, but I also just think that we tend to like put people in boxes with these diagnoses based on certain like tendencies instead of just thinking of like everybody has different strengths and everybody operates differently in this world that we like created ourselves. And maybe some people, I mean, we live in a world full of a million distractions, and to me it's not ironic that like rates of ADHD and anxiety and depression are starting to rise when like it's so hard to keep your blinders on and to focus and to not compare yourself to other people. And like I think we're kind of in a way with diagnoses and thinking of things as so black and white. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not like an expert on this. Don't take this as like expert advice. But I think that we kind of lose the humanity in these diagnoses and realize like the world's just changing and we're not evolving at the rate in which technology is. And so, and also people don't always talk about how they feel and how their responses are to the changes in the world and stuff like that. So really, I just think that we need to have more of an open conversation and realize that like some of these things just make you human and we need to stop being so hard on ourselves. So I don't know, I guess it's hard for me to answer that question because it's not so like you have it or you don't to me. But do I think that I have like hyperactive tendencies? Probably. But do I love that about myself? In a lot of ways, yeah. Like I love that I'm easily excitable and that I can, you know, kind of find beauty in mundane things. And but sometimes also I get like carried away, I get distracted and I get like carried away in conversation and I can't finish tasks, and that sucks because I have these goals and these things that that I want to accomplish. And sometimes it just feels like I just feel very avoidant. That was a really long answer to your question. And you can maybe hear it in my voice. I'm pretty passionate about this.
Yeah, no, of course. It's yeah, because that is what I didn't know, because I mean we've been friends for a while, but I didn't know that you got the diagnosis at the age of 7, or maybe like I didn't remember that. And it was just interesting because that is the age where you develop, right? So if you're putting someone in a box at such a young age, then that is what their perception would be, which is what makes their reality. So what if you hadn't got the diagnosis at 7? Would it be any different now? You know, that's a very interesting question, actually.
Yeah. Like, and honestly, I don't even remember. It might have been earlier than 7 by a little bit. I wasn't like 2, right? Like you can't, baby's like crawling around. You can't be like, you have ADHD, baby. But I do think to a certain extent, like not to get too deep too fast, but when you're told that this diagnosis is like kind of your identity, it's tough to form one of your own and to like accept the parts of yourself that people tie into a diagnosis. So that's like, just in full transparency and honesty and vulnerability, like that's kind of what I'm doing now in adulthood, is like figuring out who I am instead of just like being told you have this thing and then finding parts of myself to fill in what I was told that I was. I'm like really doing a lot of undoing. So that's why I'm like, I have no idea if I have this thing. And sometimes trying to figure that out, it makes things a little bit worse. So I'm just giving myself grace and love, and being like, Lauren, if you have these certain like tendencies, hyperactive. I also tend to be a little bit on the anxious side, which definitely has been at like the forefront of travel, like because when you travel alone as a woman, especially, like I was raised pretty sheltered. I'm not even gonna lie. Like out of all of my siblings, I'm for sure the one that's like everyone's back in Minnesota. Like I was raised in the suburbs, and out of my siblings, I'm the one that's like gone out and done kind of crazy stuff. But like it's not like a natural thing for me to go out and do all of this stuff. Until I was 20, I'd only been to the United States and Mexico, like never even to Canada. And I'm really blessed and grateful to have been able to even travel to a different country and stuff like that. But all of the travels that I've done have been on my own. And so like going back to anxiety, like your most basic human needs, obviously like food and water, but like a sense of feeling safe and like safety is kind of like compromised when you have anxious tendencies, and your mind tends to like go to worst case scenarios. That's something I for sure struggle with. And so I would say, like, since you're in a new country where you don't off the bat like have family or friends or really necessarily like know anybody, you might not know the language, you might not, your phone might not work when you first land, you're kind of like on unsolid ground, and you're like figuring it out as you go. Anxiety it's the one I would say that's like felt the strongest.
That is very, like, I can see you working through so many things, and that's actually really profound. I kind of want to go back to the part where you had talked about how it's like, now that you're adulting, you are, deciding like which boxes are not for you, or just identifying the kind of person that you are and discovering different parts of yourself and unlearning and all that. That's actually really profound. And yeah, so it's just that, dude, this is like a lot of good content. Like, I'm so proud of you. I'm not gonna,
sorry, I'm like
I'm so proud of you, like
going through a lot right now.
So many
I hope I'm not oversharing. Cut out any of this. Let's like, Lauren, get your life together.
No, this is just,
you're sharing
I
too
just
much.
hug you, and I'm so proud of you.
The coolest part of all of this is that I know that one day I am going to look back at my life and know exactly why everything happened. Like, I am a firm believer in that. And right now I'm just in the middle of it. I was just talking with my flatmate yesterday about like the hero's journey, and how like nobody that ever impacted or touched somebody's life like didn't go through anything in their own life. and you have to like be the hero of your own story and conquer so many different things. And like I just think that that's so beautiful, that like I have no idea where I'm gonna be in a year, or when I'm 50, or when I'm, you know, hopefully, you know, make it to 75, 80, and I'll look back and be able to say like I did that. Like I lived in India, I lived in New York City, like made my dream come true with that, and I met all of these different people, and I like learned how to flow and kind of let go of control a little bit. Like that's why I do this, guys. Like when people say do it for the plot, like really do it for the plot.
Do it for the plot, yeah. It's like, because these are the things that no matter what, like you can look back and like you did that, and these are the things which no one, or like no one can take it away from you, you know?
Yeah. And this is why, like, this is how people write books. This is how you just don't know that you're that person, because you feel like you're going through shit. Like life feels like shit a lot of the time. And it's just, really like, and I don't mean that in like a sad way. If life didn't feel like shit, it would mean that I was comfortable and that I was doing things that were familiar to me all the time and staying in my comfort zone. Like I'm so grateful that I feel this way, because it means that I'm forcing myself into an uncomfortable situation. So like really seek discomfort, go, like it's such a sign of like a good thing, but it feels so horrible sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's difficult, you know, and like the traveling part and the solo part is just, it just hits different. You mentioned, and even like in the last episode we talked about how it feels like to be constantly on the road and to not have a consistent home and all that stuff. And then you mentioned that you deal with a lot of anxiety. Like how do you, traveling to new places brings a lot of anxiety, like how do you deal with that then? Even when it's like people and all that stuff, it's like I'm sure there might be a lot of anxiety inducing situations because you don't really know them. So how do you deal with anxiety during that time?
Yeah, so I'm gonna like give kind of some background and then some like specific suggestions that I give to people. When it comes to like meeting people, this is gonna sound very counterintuitive, but I feel like when you have anxious tendencies, it's like you're anxious about like the future and what could happen in the future. So like say I'm anxious about making friends, like, and that was a case when I left New York and went to Lisbon. I hadn't really stayed at hostels. I've been like an Airbnb girl. Hostel living was just like it was not my thing. I didn't think, at least. And turns out hostels are like, they changed my life. They're amazing. But I was anxious about just thinking about the future of how am I going to meet people? Will I find anyone that I like? Like, will they like me? Things like that. But my suggestion is, if you're solo traveling and you're going to like stay at a hostel, go to, first of all, look at Hostel World, look at the reviews, but go to the party hostel. And that sounds insane, but for me, at least, like the Band-Aid ripping approach is the best one. Like if I throw myself in with the sharks, maybe that's just because that's how like my life has been. Like when I've been in jobs, I've gotten thrown a lot of clients really off the bat. Like I was a competitive gymnast. Like you throw me into kind of more extreme situations and I actually do better than if I'm like eased into it. And so like if you are anxious about, oh my God, will I meet friends? If you go to the party hostel, people are going to talk to you. Like it's just inevitable, like, because everybody's there to socialize and maybe do some other things, if you catch my drift. But like only do, once you're there, like obviously what you like, listen to your intuition, right? I don't want to say like only do what you're comfortable with, because like there were times that I didn't quote unquote like feel like going on like a pub crawl or something like that, but it didn't feel like, your gut will tell you if something feels unsafe. It didn't feel like that. I just was like, I'm like feeling melancholy and like low energy or whatever. No, go and do that kind of a thing. But when you are in a situation where people just like warmly welcome you, which happens at a party hostel because everybody's so social, like that made me feel better instantly. Like when I went to Lisbon for 2 days, I stayed at this hostel that had like no vibe at all. And I stayed in my bed for like literally those 2 days. I was so distraught about leaving New York. Like I felt so just like melancholy and sad. I didn't even want to go explore the city like at all. I didn't want to be there. And then all of the hostels were booked because it was the summertime and it was a weekend. And I was kind of like a novice traveler. I didn't know to book through the weekend. Book through the weekend if it's the summer in Europe, because the weekend sells out really, really fast at like every hostel. So the only hostel available was this party hostel, but it was called G Spot. I was scared for my life to go to this hostel because I am not like I'm not a super party girl. I'm very wholesome vibes.
Yeah.
But God, I went to this hostel and immediately this guy started talking to me. Mm-hmm. And at first you kind of put your guard up and you're like, what is happening right now? But then you just like ease into it and everybody's talking to everyone. Like if you have anxiety. So I'm really afraid of being like an intrusive person. And so I guess like for me, I don't, off the bat when I'm meeting a stranger, like I don't want to ask them any question that makes them feel uncomfortable or whatever. But like questions that you can ask people, which is really normal, even if you're all sitting in silence, is like, hey, where are you from? Mm-hmm. And then someone says, hey, I'm from Australia. And you can be like, oh, sick, like never been to Australia, but you know, I've always wanted to go. I hear that Melbourne is cool, like whatever. And then they ask you where you're from. And I say New York. And they're like, no way, I went to New York. I stayed near Times Square and this and that. And then you kind of start to like relate to each other. But that's a great place to jump off from, is like, especially if you're like, people, for me at least, have being someone with anxious tendencies, I feel like I need to have like a go-to thing that I go to, like questions that I know are okay. Where are you from is a great one, and then it just kind of goes from there. But yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but yeah, do the party hostel.
So yeah, look for party hostels. You possibly have a list of questions you could start off with. If it gets awkward, you could just like go back to your list and, you know, continue the conversation. So that is something that could help people with anxiety.
Yeah. And you know what? There's like, honestly, there's nothing really to even be, I don't want to say there's nothing to be anxious about because I don't want to be like invalidating, but you're maybe, first of all, if you're in a hostel, if you don't like someone, just go talk to the next person. Likelihood is you guys will like each other. And also the people that you connect with, you'll stay in touch with. And the people that you maybe like you're indifferent towards, or people that like, this doesn't happen often. This has maybe happened to me like twice. The people that you just don't really vibe with, they're probably leaving in like 2 days, or you're probably leaving in 2 days. So you just leave. It's really nice.
That's true. So you don't really have to like worry about that, and chances are very low that you would bump into each other that often, because if you're traveling, you'd probably be just, you know, sightseeing or just going outside during the day.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll find the people you vibe with. It's inevitable.
Fair. How do you decide on like the living spaces? Because you've also been couch surfing, you've been using hostess sister and all that. So like, how do you decide on that? Do you get apprehensive about the places? And if you do, then, you know, how do you navigate through those?
Sure. So, hostels is where I started, and I'm really glad that I did, because if you're traveling Europe in the summer, you will likely, first of all, meet a lot of people from Europe who are also traveling. And also a lot of people share the same route. And so say you're staying at a hostel and you meet someone, and like I was in Lisbon and then I went south to the Algarve. And then when I went to the Algarve, I was at this random pizza restaurant, and the guy from the hostel in Lisbon also sat down at the pizza restaurant, and he took a totally different route, but we ended up at the same place. Yeah. I make jokes that we need to have like a class of 2022 like backpackers Europe thing, because people just continue to run into each other, especially in these bigger cities that they saw in a previous city. Like the world is so small. Yeah. But yeah, so I definitely suggest staying in hostels in the beginning, just for the social life. And for the activities, like hostels will tell you exactly what to do in the city, the cool things, the more kind of underground scene, etc. And then if you like, I would stay at hostels basically the entire time. In the beginning, I would get a little bit fatigued because I tend to be on like the ambivert, almost like borderline introvert side. And so every maybe like 4 hostels, I would get an Airbnb for a couple of nights. And it worked out really well for me, because some other travelers that I met who I would see like in the first city and then on like the 4th city, like my friend Alex, I met in Lisbon, and then him and I happened to be in Sevilla at the same time. He was also feeling a little bit tired. And so we just got an Airbnb together and like split the cost.
Okay. Yeah.
That way you can like oftentimes like do your laundry and just have a little bit of space to yourself. But as I continued on, like I met people that were European and that like stopped their travels because they were just traveling for a couple of weeks, and we would stay in touch, and I would just go like stay with them at their place like maybe a month and a half into my trip. Like a month and a half in, I ended up in Cologne in the west of Germany, and I stayed with this girl Sarah that I'd met in Florence in Italy.
That is crazy. It's crazy how connections, you make when you're traveling so much. So how do you determine when, like, let's say you're overthinking about a certain decision while traveling, how do you determine when the overthinking that is caused by the anxiety is good for you or not? Like, how do you know this is just, the anxiety acting up, or maybe it's your, I don't know, intuition or something?
Ooh, I love this question, and I have a very specific example for it.
Okay.
Honestly, this whole trip has been a process of me trusting that the right thing will flow into my life. I've always been the kind of person that wants to make things happen. And the purpose of this entire trip, which wasn't planned, like I planned Lisbon for like 4 days, and then I had nothing. Like I had no idea where I was gonna go. But like I've learned that if you don't know where to like go next, you'll meet somebody that you don't even know exists right now, and they'll say, hey, I have this really, really cool place that you have to go to. And then like the transportation will like flow into your life. Like everything that you need will come into your life. But a lot of people will go to Europe and plan everything. Like they say, hey, I know I'm going to go to Lisbon and then to Madrid and then to Barcelona and then up to Paris. Like they know those things. And I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to, by saying yes to one thing, like a city or anything, I did not want to say no to all of the magical things that could have happened when I got to that place that I didn't even know existed yet. But there have been times where I really, really cut it close. But every single time, like, let me emphasize, every single time I've been safe, I've had a place to sleep, and I've met people that like where I've just never been alone. And I've just felt very protected. So like, for example, I was in Florence and I was staying at this hostel that like I didn't love it. It wasn't that great. It was 2 a.m. and the next night they were booked and I had like no place to stay in Florence. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But at this point I was maybe a month and a half into my trip. So I was like, okay, I can do this. And I went on Hostel World. Hostel World's great. And I found this hostel that was like 45 minutes into the countryside. Now this was new for me because I had always booked hostels that were in the middle of the city just for like accessibility, like close to public transportation, things like that.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit of a leap of faith. You have to take a bus out to this hostel in Tuscany that's in a monastery. And then you have to walk up this hill for like 20 minutes with all of your backpacking gear in the middle of summer. But the reviews were insanely good. It was in a monastery. And like I said, and the views looked amazing. So I did it. And it was the best hostel I've stayed at in my entire life. But that wouldn't have happened. And I was anxious. Like I was really nervous at 2 a.m. trying to find the next place to stay for the next night. But if I wouldn't have like procrastinated / if the hostels hadn't all been booked, then I wouldn't have chosen for myself to go out 45 minutes of the city. Like it was kind of chosen for me, and I had the most amazing experience at that hostel, like of my life. I've met people that I'm still friends with today. Rodney, my friend, was actually on my podcast, who I met. Sarah, the girl who I stayed with in Cologne, met her at that hostel. It's called Ostello Bigelow Youth Hostel in Florence, so go stay there. Shout out to them. They're amazing.
So it's just that the universe just will always, conspire for you, and it will make sense if you just have enough faith in the process.
That's very alchemist of you, and yes, I do believe that.
I love alchemist.
The anxiety versus intuition thing is very interesting, and I think I'm still figuring that out. But I think that if something feels uncomfortable, that's more related to anxiety, but it could be the right thing for you. Like it wasn't comfortable for me to start traveling, but that didn't mean I shouldn't do it. I just kind of had some resistance towards it. But like, honestly, I feel that, like I said before, that you'll just be protected, and you're never alone. You always meet people at hostels and people that will like help guide you. And there's a ton of things you can do to prepare and stuff. But be cautious, but don't let anything scare you away from doing things that you're uncomfortable to do, because like I really think that we're just like divinely protected, not to be like woo about it, but anyways, yeah.
Do you feel these emotions in your, because like sometimes, you know, these emotions, you feel it in your body, in different parts of your body, and because you're so in touch with the spiritual side of life as well, have you ever felt like, okay, this is the part where I feel fear or anxiety or stress, or you know, maybe I'm just excited but it's coming out off in the form of fear? Like, is there any certain part in your body that you feel that?
Ooh, good question. I'm a very like heady kind of a person. I think a lot and I overthink a lot. So for me, you asked about body, so I'm not really answering your question by saying that I think a lot, but like if I'm thinking and overthinking about something, that is usually just my head and sort of anxious feelings driving. But like, for example, when I lived in Croatia, I was there as a volunteer at a hostel. But before I decided I wanted to volunteer there, I actually did like a interview with this artist in Italy, and that job seemed really, really cool. Especially given like I'm really into visual arts and like drawing and things. I just got this weird vibe from this guy. Like I felt it in like my solar plexus. You just, I don't know, just kind of feel like you want to crawl out of your skin a little bit. He didn't have any reviews because he was new on World Packers, but yeah, there's just a sense of like uneasiness that's not an overthinking kind of a situation. It's like I don't know, you know it when you feel it, but I would say I feel it mostly in my like solar plexus kind of area, so like above my stomach, below my chest.
Okay. That answers it actually. That's interesting. So coming back to ADHD and traveling, are you on any medications at the moment?
So I am now that I've started to see a psychiatrist in India. I started taking like a lower dose of an ADHD medication. But like when I was living in New York, I was on a different medication that like they don't have in India / like around most of the world, to be honest. So I had some medication. I mean, like I mostly had for jobs in New York are pretty hectic, right? And so it was even harder to focus on certain things. But in New York, I would take it regularly. But then since I started to travel, I kind of had to like ration it, which sounds horrible. But I guess I took it more on like when I talked to a psychiatrist about it in New York, I took it more on like an as needed basis. Like most weekends I wouldn't take it just because I didn't really need to like focus as heavily. I could kind of do it that way. That's just what she said was fine. Whether that's right or not, if people disagree with that, I can't really determine that. But yeah, so I really just I kept some of them, then I traveled with that prescription. But then now that I'm like settled in a place where healthcare is a lot more affordable, I can start seeing a psychiatrist here. And since I'm settled in Mumbai, I have some projects that I want to like really work on and nail out. So yeah, on a different one, but it's like similar chemicals, I guess, similar effect.
So like throughout the travel, how did you make sure you didn't run out of them? Or how did you make sure, because like certain medications aren't legal in certain countries. So how do you go about it?
Right. So like the medication that I had wasn't legal where I was. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for this. There's no reason why I would. But
No, you're good. Yeah.
it wasn't like legal to get that prescription in that place. And so I didn't take it regularly. The thing about ADHD medication is it's one where it enters and leaves your system really quickly. If and like the side effects aren't like I've been on an SSRI before, and the side effects of those can be pretty gnarly when you're getting off. But like the side effect of ADHD is that you just kind of go back to like being less focused.
Yeah.
I didn't like I said, I only took it really when I needed that little boost of focus. And I figured, I was like, oh, I'm traveling, so like if it gets, and I was on like a low dose too, so I'm like, oh, if I need to figure out a way to get a prescription legally here that's like a similar alternative, then I'll figure that out. But I just didn't really feel the need to.
Okay. I guess. Fair enough.
This is not good advice. Like, don't do it how and don't necessarily do it how I'm doing it. Like, if you need to take your medication consistently, like make sure that you bring enough like of your medication when you're traveling, or that you have access to it in the new country that you're going to. For me, it was just a little bit of a unique circumstance.
So I have I was doing some research regarding like just ADHD and travel, and I came across this thing where some adults shared their experiences, and they were like, for them, travel, I don't know, calms their ADHD. Like it sometimes it suits the symptoms that they experience with ADHD, and sometimes it just haywires. So because they have ADHD, they have a really difficult time traveling. What would you say, like what has been the case for you in this with traveling?
I can definitely see why there would be both sides of it. With it soothing their ADHD, I think that because when you're traveling, there's like so much stimulus, you never really get bored or anything like that, which is kind of cool. Like, you can always just decide to do a new thing, and that's kind of what I see is like going with the flow. But also on the other side of it, it's like, since it can be difficult to like slow down and plan something, it can also be really stressful, because like I don't know if other people that like have ADHD tendencies experience like FOMO, but I have like really heavy FOMO. And so like, because there's so many options, and I can be kind of indecisive at times, like because there's so many options, it can be hard to know like which one I want to do and which one feels right, and like most like what I feel like doing. So that can be kind of overwhelming. If you have trouble with like just sitting down and planning things, though, again, like the nice part of staying at a hostel and meeting other people is that oftentimes they'll just say, hey, I have this, like in the morning, I can't count how many times someone's been like, hey, I'm going to this cave. That was a really random example. Or like, hey, I'm going to this beach, or going to this cathedral, or something like that. Do you want to come along? And so you just do, and say yes to like everything, basically. And if there's nothing happening really, I have kind of this is how I met my first friends when I went to Lisbon. I kind of have a rule for myself that I learned along the way, which again, it kind of has to do with like the asking where someone's from, having a list of things, top of your mind that you want to talk to about people, to get to know them, and have like a genuine curiosity. The first thing that I started to do when I got to every city is go on a free walking tour. And it happens in most major cities around the world. I can't even count how many I've been to. But I do that basically on the first day that I get to a new place, because it like forces me to get up and to go. It's not over, like for me, I think this is probably an ADHD thing. When I wake up immediately, I feel very overwhelmed by like all the things that I have to do, and like the options that there are. And so having this rule of like the first day that I get somewhere, after a good night's sleep, like I go on the free walking tour. It happens usually at like 10 or 11 a.m. Do the morning one, so that you're like forced to get onto kind of a schedule where you wake up early-ish. And then you meet at like a central meeting point with other people from all over the world. You choose like your language. So if you're English, if you're Spanish, there's multiple languages usually. And you walk around the city for like 2 or 3 hours and see all of the, like a lot of times you see like a lot of the major things that there are to do depending on how big the city is. So like Paris, there's going to be multiple free walking tours, right? Like with exploring different areas. So like one could be like Montmartre, one could be I don't know, yeah, like the Champs-Elysees area. But you go and walk around. The tour guide is very knowledgeable. Usually they've been doing it for many years. They'll tell you about like places to avoid, the best places to eat, what foods you have to try. Sometimes you'll even get like discounts. And what's really cool is that it's purely donation based. And so say you're like balling on a budget with traveling, like I was, you can give however much you can, as well as like what you how you think the experience was. Some are longer, some are like an hour, some are or shorter, excuse me, some are like an hour, some are longer, some are like 3 hours. So and then after that you can just like whatever they say to do or recommend, like you already saw a lot of the city, you already knocked off a lot of the touristy things, so you're not going to get FOMO there. And then once they say, like when they suggest something else, you just choose what feels good and go there. And oftentimes you meet other travelers on these free walking tours and you become friends with them. So like that's, again, like I said, that's how I made my first friends. And then after we all went to dinner together, some of us went and explored a different smaller city outside of Lisbon together. So free walking tour on the first day that you get somewhere is like great. And you just Google like Lisbon free walking tour, Paris free walking tour, things like that.
Yeah, that's actually interesting advice. I'll make sure I do that the next time I travel actually.
Yeah.
So like being on road for such a long time with, well, no deadlines, how do you incorporate some structure in your travel? I mean, the travel, I'm assuming the walking tour thing, deciding on going on walking tours certainly helps with it. But are there any other ways where, that you do that helps incorporate some structure?
Sure. Yeah. Another great question. I think the biggest thing that I would say is, if you have no deadline, if you're just going, slow travel is the best way to do it. Because it takes a good few days, for me at least, to, if not a good week, couple weeks, because when you're traveling between countries, you're not just having to like, you don't just take a bus and arrive there. Like maybe some people are like that, and I tend to be someone that like feels the weight of change really heavily. And so oftentimes it's not just, oh, this is a new place. It's no, like the new currency, the prices are different of things. So I have to like adjust how I budget things in my mind. The language is oftentimes different. And like, I'm very conscious of trying to learn a little bit of the language of the place that I'm going, just like hello, goodbye, thank you. But when you're traveling to a different country every like 5 days, that can be really exhausting. So part of me felt like my body was moving faster than my mind was. And then my mind was like in the last place still, or even a couple of places before that. But with slow travel, it's nice because if you go somewhere and you stay there like a month or two, first of all, you can say that you really got to know that place and that you know of secret spots there, and you didn't just hit that city to say that you've been there, right? Like everyone travels differently, and that's very respectable. But I think sometimes when I see people that are traveling somewhere every like 2 days, I question what the intention is, and like are you really experiencing and like living out what this city is, and getting to know the people and really like immersing yourself in it and dancing how they dance and learning to cook and like actually feeling what it's like to live there? Or are you just going there to like party and just knock that city off of this list that you have and stuff like that? So when it comes to like ADHD and anxiety specifically, if you stop and really get to know a place, I think you'll feel a lot more fulfilled. You save a lot of like money doing it that way because you're not spending so much money on transportation, which adds up really quickly. Say you're more comfortable with like an Airbnb, you can get discounts on an Airbnb if you stay there for a whole month. And you don't have to feel so rushed to like get back into your routine. If you take a week to transition and you're just like journaling or walking by the sea or staying in bed, like you have the time to, and like you're giving yourself the space and the grace to like adjust. So I genuinely really believe in slow travel, and that like it might not be the most glamorous. You can't post that you're in a different place every few days, but I don't think that's really how humans are like meant to operate. So slow travel is what's worked the best for me.
I love how, you have such rich experience, honestly, in traveling. It's like how to travel efficiently while having ADHD, but also, just solo traveling and budget traveling as well. It's just, yeah, another great advice, honestly.
Thanks. Yeah, there's so many aspects to it. And the other thing with slow travel is that if you're young or if you're just not wanting to spend a lot of money traveling, look up workaways, look up world packers. Like, I can send you the links to these to include in the show notes. They're basically volunteering opportunities where you can go somewhere. They have them all over the world. That's what I did when I was in Huvar. That's why I was there for 2 months. I was volunteering at a hostel. I met people from all over the world. I volunteered like 20 hours a week, and then I spent the rest of the time like at the beach. My hours were really flexible. I had a great manager. Her name is Radha. She's amazing. And I had I stayed in like a dorm for the first little bit, but I was there at the end of the season, so there was barely anybody else in there. And then for the rest of the time I had my own room. Like everything is covered. Like your food is, for the most part, your food is covered, your room and board is covered. You usually get like laundry as part of it. And so it's kind of like you're living there, quote unquote, like for free, but you have to volunteer. Like you don't get paid for it, but it's so fun, and you get to say that you had that experience.
I want to try Workaway so badly. I could actually try that in Himachal now that I'm planning a trip now. Yeah, I should do that.
I'm actually going to suggest that. It's really like, it's such an enriching experience. Like I looked at first because I was like, oh yeah, having a purpose and doing work and giving, like I need some structure in my life. I feel like just too loosey right now, like loosey goosey, especially as someone that like started really young. Yeah. Like I was like, I don't have a purpose. I'm not doing anything. I'm just traveling. And even though that is enough, it didn't really feel like enough. I like to have some structure in my life. So volunteering was great for me because I just, the concept of money, I realize it's very important. I just don't love it. So I'm like, if I have all my basic needs met and I just need to volunteer and meet people from around the world, like how enriching of an experience is that? How like pure and just like wholesome of an experience is that? So 1,000,000% you could travel all around the world on very little money. You would have to travel slowly, right? Like I think the shortest work away is like a week, but don't do that. Do 3 weeks, a month. You can do 6-month ones. Really anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I've always wanted to try it. Like I think I came across the concept of workaways last year, not even last year, 2021, and I've been wanting to do it, but like the only thing is they require you to stay for like at least a week, and I haven't been able to travel for at least a week apart from the France trip. But yeah, now that I want to travel again, I'm gonna look for workaways. It's gonna be amazing. So one of the things while I was doing again, looking up things, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I went on Reddit just to see what people have experiences with ADHD and traveling, and someone had commented that packing is often one of the reasons why traveling is hard. So like the organization and packing and stuff. Would you say that packing and unpacking, like that thing, has been an issue for you, like just has been difficult for you?
Yes. So I'm back. I have a backpack. I have a 40-liter backpack, and then I have another backpack that I put on my, like the front of me. If you've ever seen like backpacker reels or TikToks or whatever, where like someone has a backpack on their front and their back, that's me. And yeah, I do think that it's a little stressful just because you can't like you can't open a suitcase and have everything there just looking back at you and knowing what to wear, and there's not really a way to iron your clothes. So if you have anything made out of linen or easily wrinkleable clothes, it can be kind of tough at times. And also everything kind of has its own place. So say I'm in a city and taking a day trip to another city, I basically just bring everything I have, because reorganizing it into a smaller bag and then putting everything back where it was is more work than it would be just to have everything where it is and to take everything with you. I can't say it's like with confidence that it's an ADHD thing, because every traveler that I've ever met has had the same struggle if they're backpacking. So again, it kind of just ties back to maybe it does feel more intense for me as somebody that has ADHD tendencies, but like I really just think it's a human thing to feel stressed out about only having, you get like this little drawer usually underneath your bed or a little cubby type of a thing, but you're working in very close quarters and it's easy to want to strew all of your stuff all over the place, especially when you're used to having your own room back home. So maybe it has to do with ADHD, but I think it's just part of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What would be your advice for someone who wishes to travel, but is scared because, you know, they deal with, let's say, ADHD?
I would say with ADHD, if you're feeling overwhelmed or nervous about planning or what you're going to do in a city, just spend time with other people in common areas and you'll just naturally put together a plan. And if like that's happened every single time or almost every single time I've been somewhere, and then you just go in and do that thing. I have rarely used Google. Like in the past when I've planned a trip for 2 weeks or whatever, I've Googled like what to do in, you know, San Juan or what to do in this place. And I think I've maybe had to do that twice during my travels because I've just met other people that have been like that already know kind of what to do, and then you just tag along. But in the same breath, because I mentioned the FOMO thing before, like listen to your body. If you're not feeling like doing something and you know in your soul that you need to be by yourself and just like go on a walk, do that. There's no harm in spending time by yourself when you're surrounded by a group of people as well. And like you'll know, like for me, I start to get kind of, and if I'm with people for too long and I don't want to bring that energy into a group, and so I'll just know maybe we need to get a little bit of exercise, get like that energy cleared away, make sure that you're hydrated. But yeah, for ADHD, I would definitely just say hang around people and I guess kind of like do what they do in a way. If it sounds interesting to you.
No, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. That's great advice.
And make sure before you travel anywhere to look up if you need a visa there, because I think the whole organization thing, like know your essentials, right? Make sure that you have your passport, make sure that you have your medication and prescriptions, and then also look up if you need to have a visa where you're going. I just released an episode, it's episode 16 on my own podcast, about visas, and there's like a website that I included in that where you can like look up your own passport and then the country that you're going to see if you need a visa. But I've heard stories of you needing a visa in a country, like I heard a story about this girl who was from Australia and she bought a ticket to come all the way to India, and she got here and she didn't know she needed a visa, and they sent her right back home to Australia, like the first flight back, because it takes like a week, like maybe 4 or 5 days to get your Indian visa. It's not visa on entry for Americans, at least, and I think for Australians too. So like just have that peace of mind. That's going to be definitely for sure a priority, is like have a passport, make sure if you need a visa, like get that checked out.
That's good advice. Do you think, like, is there anything else that I missed out on or didn't ask?
I don't think so. Like really the biggest thing that I've learned is that if you're not feeling certain about something, the next move, the thing that you want to do, anything like that, don't feel guilty about that, and don't feel guilty about procrastinating, because like I said before, the right thing is it will just flow into your life. I can't remember if I talked about this on the part 1 of this of our podcasting episodes together, but when I was in Turkey, it was like the 11th hour and I had to get back to Istanbul from Cappadocia, and I was taking a flight from Istanbul to Delhi, so I couldn't really miss that flight. It was a few days before, and I was looking at buses and looking at flights, and nothing felt right. Like usually you'll find like a mode of transportation or like a ticket to something and you'll see it and you'll like know. Travelers talk about this phenomenon called like the last one phenomenon, where like if you go to book a train or like a bus or like a concert ticket and it's like the last ticket left, it's like a thing, right? Like it was meant for me. It's really common amongst travelers because we have to buy tickets all the time to things. So it's very like a meant to be kind of a thing. But I was looking at flights, I was looking at buses, nothing was right. And I knew that. And I placed so much pressure on myself because I was like, Lauren, just make up your mind. Like really, it's either would have, like anything would have worked, right? Like it would have been fine if I took the flight or the bus, like I would have been totally good. But I felt like there was something else. So I literally was about to book the flight. I went into the hostel's lobby area to book the airport transfer because I didn't want to book the flight until I knew I could get to the airport because it was a really early flight. And I met these two guys from Romania who, like, I didn't know them at all. They were actually the ones who told me about couch surfing most recently, and that's how I did couch surfing here in India because they reminded me it existed. But met these guys. Turned out that their flight was out of the same airport as mine. Only like 6 hours before mine. And Istanbul's like the biggest city I've been to in my life. There's two airports. We happen to be flying out of the same one and on the same day, just a few hours apart. And they had rented a car. And so they were like, yo, we're just gonna like drive back. If you wanna drive back with us, you can. And best vibes, really good. Like I'm a very, very cautious person. And so for me to be like, these two guys were great. Like I had no hesitation. And like, you just know, like you meet these people, this circumstance comes into your life, and like big ones, you know that it's the right thing. So we went like skiing in Turkey. We went to this like salt lake, this pink salt lake thing. We went to this monastery that was like built into a mountain. And we're still friends. We're still in touch to this day. And I made my flight and it was like a whole fiasco, but trust, again, like I said, that the right thing will flow into your life. If you don't feel like planning, don't feel guilty about it. There will always be a mode of transportation to get to you to the next place. There will always be a place for you to sleep. You'll meet people that'll help you along the way. It's really, really a journey.
That is so cool. So we are like coming towards an end of the episode. It has genuinely been very insightful, you know, the first episode that we worked together and even this one. Thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for being here and being so open about your journey with mental health. We really appreciate it. Where can people reach out to you?
First of all, thank you again for having me. It was so fun to do a part 2 of this and really just giving creating the space, the safe space, to be able to have these conversations. Avantika, it's really all you. So thank you for having me. As far as socials, I'm on Instagram fairly actively. My Instagram is low on the go 1. So that's LAU on the go with the number 1 at the end. My podcast has the same name. It's on Spotify and Apple Music, Apple Podcast and Amazon Podcast and all the things. It's also called Low on the Go, LAU on the go. And I think I also have a blog, lowonthego.com, but I'm not really as active on that. So Instagram, and if you want to follow my podcast too, I would love that. I talk about travel and some like, you know, mental health stuff as well. So
100% recommend her podcast. It's amazing. The content that she puts out, it is so relatable and so informative and so insightful. Oh my God. So I'll be linking all the socials and the links to her podcast in the description below. Do check it out. And she's very welcoming and warm, and you know, you can always reach out to her for anything that you want. Regarding
slide into the DMs. I don't mind at all. I'll respond.
I'll be linking everything in the description below. Thank you so much for being here, Lauren. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who made it towards the end. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your feedback and support. I really appreciate it. We have hit more than 100 followers on Spotify. So yeah, it's really, really encouraging to, you know, see that. So thank you for being here. My email and Instagram will be linked down below. Do reach out if you feel like it. I would love to hear what you thought about the episode and what kind of content you would want us to put out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode. I love you. Bye.